Welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Will. Well, what an amazing spring afternoon, and this is the first time Civil War Digital Digest has been able to photograph in Kentucky. We want to say thanks to our patrons, the CWDD coffee grinders. Your financial support is allowing us to go further across the country and explore more stories from the Civil War. And I'm joined today by my friend Steve Phan, who's the Chief of Interpretation. Steve, go ahead and introduce us.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. Hope you brought your kite with you because it's a bit windy today. But I'd like to welcome you and all your viewers to Camp Nelson National Monument, one of the newest National Park Service units. We were established or proclaimed in October of 2018, and we commemorate Camp Nelson, a Federal Army supply base, a recruiting center, and a refugee camp as well.
Let's talk about Camp Nelson. Let's take it at the beginning. When is Camp Nelson established?
Camp Nelson will be established by the order of General Ambrose Burnside. April 29th, 1863, they're going to site out this location on very good ground between the Kentucky River to our west, Hickman Creek to our east, a very formidable position where they can move men and supplies and then launch offensive into East Tennessee to liberate the Unionists that are in that area.
Well, as we look to build this place, Steve, I'm going to out us both. We're both fort nerds. You're now, instead of a fort nerd, you're a military engineer in the Union Army, and you come here in the spring of 1863. What do you like about this place?
Well, it's very formidable ground. It's protected on three different sides here, Will. We talked about the Kentucky River to the west. It also wraps around to the south here. So the west and the south are secure. And there's the east, which is very secure by the Hickman Creek as well, which will feed into the Kentucky River south of this area here. So the only position that the federal engineers will have to fortify is the northern section of the camp here. So there will be a system of earthworks, really unclosed forts that will be constructed to protect the camp all along the line from west to east. Importantly, these were constructed by impressed African-American enslaved people. The Army literally impressed these people, had them construct these earthworks, other structures connected to the camp, and paid the slaveholders. So,
well, okay, time out. This is the spring of 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation is given in the January 1st. What's going on here? Well,
Kentucky's a border state. You know, it remains in the United States. It did not break away and join the Confederacy. So federal law is still intact here, including the federal slave laws. And also, you know, slavery is legal here. And so this is one of the border states, as we called it, with Missouri, Delaware.
So the first people working here who are African Americans are enslaved persons who are being essentially hired out by their masters to the government.
Absolutely.
Maybe not by choice.
Maybe not by choice, certainly not by choice, but interestingly enough, this will evolve, my friend, to 1864 when the Army, despite the grievances by white Kentuckians, will begin enlisting African Americans at Camp Nelson, including those that used to be enslaved that helped construct the defenses of the camp here. About 10,000 African American troops will be organized into 8 USCT regiments at Camp Nelson. It's going to be one of the largest recruiting centers in the country during the course of the Civil War.
And where are they housed when they're here?
All sorts of barracks located throughout the camp here, and even, I'm sure a lot of your viewers understand, pup tents and different aid tents, and even big Sibley tents were brought out here. So these troops will be organized here really in 1864. By the way, there will be a number of Tennessee, East Tennessee, and Kentucky regiments consisting of white soldiers organized at the camp as well. Many will see action during the March to the Sea and the Atlanta campaign with Sherman and things like that. These soldiers, the USCT soldiers, some will stay in Kentucky, others will end up even in Virginia, and some will be at the surrender at Appomattox on April 9th, 1865. Absolutely incredible story. And some of those units will serve until 1866, 1867 along the Mexican border in Texas.
Wow, so that's fairly long term of service. We see a lot of what's happening with enlistment, both with African American soldiers and with white soldiers here. What else is happening at this fort?
It's really interesting how this camp evolves, right? Really from a supply base, you know what I actually call it, Will? A forward operating base, right? The Department of the Ohio manages this area here, several states in the Midwest. General Burnside's initial headquarters in Cincinnati, and he'll actually make his way down to Camp Nelson in August of 1863. He'll be around the camp for about 5 days, and then he's going to move the Army of the Ohio south towards Tennessee in his Knoxville campaign, which will be successful. So initially, this is all about the military here, right? Supply base. Forward operating base, a place that we can bring troops, we can build hospitals, and it becomes, hey, we're in central Kentucky, right? Horses and mules. That's a huge story here. A rehabilitation center for horses and mules. Some of the corrals can hold up to about 12,000 animals. And if you think about where the armies are operating, especially in Tennessee, there's so much space. They need horses and mules to operate, to move around, to carry supplies. And so this will be a big part of the story as well.
Fantastic. So we've talked about the military almost exclusively here. Can you talk to me about people who either were displaced from here when the military came in, or people who chose to come here to seek refuge?
It becomes a refugee camp for not only enslaved African Americans from Kentucky who come here by the thousands, but there are even white East Tennesseans fleeing Confederate occupation that find their way to Camp Nelson. So in many ways, this becomes a humanitarian crisis for the U.S. Army, for the federal government. There's not a real policy about what we do with refugees in a border state, which is really important to understand. If we were, say, in South Carolina or Virginia, and you're an enslaved person and you're coming into federal lines, you're considered contraband, right? Property in a sense, and they're taking this property away from the enemy. That's not the case here. So we've got not only civilians not related to the soldiers, we have the soldiers' families themselves. So by 1863 and 1864, we have hundreds of refugees from slavery joining their husbands and their brothers at this camp. Sadly, as many of the men are enlisted in the United States Colored Troops, their families, their wives, their children, their sisters are basically seeking refuge at the camp. There's no status for them, right? The commanders don't know what to do. They don't know if they can feed them or not. So we have these pretty horrific events called expulsions, where the Army literally pushes these refugees out of camp. The worst one will come, in November of 1864, where over 400 are sent away during a winter storm. Before the order is rescinded and some of them are brought back, over 100 will die from exposure to the elements. This incident will gain national recognition in many ways. It will become a national story picked up by newspapers, and it will reach the halls of Congress. And Congress will pass legislation basically saying family members of USCT soldiers will be emancipated. So one big step forward for people. By 1864, by the way, the supply base itself becomes less important because General Grant and General Sherman realizes the best way to supply East Tennessee is actually to go around this area. Chattanooga will be the supply base for the armies moving forward. But the reason why this camp will stay around and active until 1866 are the African American soldiers and their family members.
And I don't see much of a camp here today. Let's talk about the legacy of Camp Nelson.
Yeah, so by the end of the Civil War, into the fall and winter of 1865, into the spring of 1866, the federal government will start dismantling this camp. And I want your viewers to understand how dramatically this move was. Over 300 structures here, kitchens, hospitals, workshops, barracks, a prison, quartermaster, commissary, ordnance, whatever you needed was here. And by the way, after the expulsion, the government will establish the home for colored refugees here, and there will be education programs and educators from the South that will come to educate these recently emancipated people. All that will be dismantled in 1866. And so what we have here really is an archaeological site. There is one historic structure here. Everyone can see it in the background there. The Oliver Perry House, we call it the White House. It was used as officers' quarters during the Civil War.
Gotcha. And who's Oliver Perry?
Just a local prominent family that owned property here. If I actually just read in a newspaper account from July of 1863 that the Perrys were ardent secessionists and were not very happy that the Army had really requisitioned their house for their headquarters and their property as well.
Well, Steve, you're now a national park here. Talk to me about how this site became a national park, and what it was before, and then, somebody wants to come visit, great, let's tell them what they can see.
That's a great question, Will. We must credit Jessamine County, Kentucky for us being here today. Really starting in the 1990s, they started acquiring land here that will now become Camp Nelson National Monument. We're about 450 acres now. They did a lot of excavations here, really surveyed the land to understand where all the structures were at. As I said, all the workshops and things related to the military and the civilian apparatus here. They built the barn, which looks like which is actually the visitor center. It looks like a barn, of course. On the other side, they rebuilt some barracks as well. And they developed the trail system here. They put in 35 interpretive waysides. We've only been here since October 2018. Permanent staff has only been on hand within this past 6 months or so. So we're really brand new to this area here. There's a lot underneath the surface that people can find very special at Camp Nelson here, Will. As I said, we have about a 5-mile trail system, which will be expanded, by the way. We're bringing in more property into the park here. We have the remnant earthworks for those earthwork aficionados that, like me, love seeing any movement of soil. That is out here, and what I love about that is it's a tangible physical connection to the enslaved people that built those here. Off to the east, we have this little woodlot here with another trail system as well. So for people really interested in the natural aspect of the park, there is that as well. Of course, in the visitor center, we have a museum, we have a film. At some point, we're renovating the Oliver Perry House as well. Living history, we work with a very unique living history group, the 12th United States Colored Heavy Artillery, which was organized at Camp Nelson in 1864. During the Civil War, the Army established a cemetery here for the soldiers and civilians that perished at the camp. It was known as Graveyard Number 1. In 1866, well, the soldiers were moved south of where the camp is at to Graveyard Number 2. We now know that as Camp Nelson National Cemetery, an active cemetery which is around because of Camp Nelson itself.
It's run by the VA now rather than part of the national park, but out the front driveway, turn left, and you're right there just a minute to visit so many of those boys from here and from which other battles?
Oh, great question. I mean, this is deeply connected to Civil War Kentucky, right? And so think about, obviously, Camp Nelson itself. You got the soldiers, black and white, that were moved to the cemetery in 1866. But as you know, with the National Cemetery Program after the Civil War, federal soldiers from all different battlefields were basically taken and consolidated at one national cemetery in that general area. So we have soldiers from the Battle of Perryville and Richmond, the famous battles in 1862, that are interred at the cemetery. Over 2,000 Civil War federal soldiers are buried there. Over 800 are United States colored troops.
Let me ask you, a lot of people like to go places where they can connect with history, and to a lot of people that connection is somebody they might know or somebody they might want to get to know. Talk to me about, we talk about the masses, 8 regiments of colored soldiers, multiple regiments of white soldiers, refugees of all races coming here. Talk to me about people you might recognize or might want to meet while you're here.
Well, for the Civil War enthusiasts or people, that really follow the American Civil War, we've got some pretty big names that go through this area. Probably most prominent would be Major General Ambrose Burnside, who commanded the Department of the Ohio / Army of the Ohio. He will be here, or he'll arrive on August 11th and be here for about 5 or 6 days before him and the entire Army of the Ohio march south towards the Tennessee border, including the 23rd Army Corps, which consists of all troops in Kentucky, not in his famous 9th Corps. Major General George Hartsuff, battle-scarred veteran, fought at Antietam, West Pointer. He used the Oliver Perry building as his headquarters during his stay at the camp. And of course, we have the African-American soldiers and civilians as well. Peter Bruner, a member of the 12th United States Colored Heavy Artillery, writes an account about his service that is published now. So A little bit from the highest ranking officers to the soldiers on the ground. We have a little bit of everything here at Camp Nelson.
Great, and you've got wonderful weather and beautiful scenery here. So, well, Steve, thank you for hosting us. Really look forward to being here and working with you through the future as we go on.
Well, thanks, Will. And I'll add one thing. We've been talking about the Civil War corridor in this area. There's a National Park Service one. So we have our park, Camp Nelson National Monument. One of the newest national park units is Mill Springs Battlefield National Monument, where George H. Thomas, I call him the Pebble of Mill Springs, will fight the Army of Ohio's first major battle in January of 1862. That victory will open up the federal movement to occupy Nashville in February of 1862. So that's a new national park unit. And off to our west is the Abraham Lincoln birthplace as well, which has been around since the early 1910s, all right? So we have those three major national park unit sites. Obviously, everyone thinks about Mammoth Cave as well. So for those that love going to national parks, you've got three major national parks just in this area here. And for the Civil War part, we talked about this, Will. We've got Mill Springs, we have Richmond, we have Perryville, we have Munfordville, we have Lexington, which has the Mary Todd Lincoln House. We have a little bit of everything. So come on out to Central Kentucky. We look forward to seeing you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, there you hear from Ranger Steve Phan here at Camp Nelson National Monument. Everything going on here, from high-ranking major generals to recently self-emancipated people who would either exist here or join the United States Colored Troops, and everybody in between. There's so much going on here at this site, and then around here. We keep talking about connection. This part of Kentucky is a great place to come and find another connection to the American Civil War. Hope you'll do it, and hope we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.